Ex-wife challenged the ex-husband at the winter ballroom until a restored document shattered his stance. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. The winter ballroom sparkled with soft, shimmering lights as the cold winter air slipped through the grand windows. The room was filled with elegant guests in their best attire, exchanging pleasantries, laughter, and polite conversation. Among the crowd, two figures stood out like magnets, drawing attention to themselves with an unspoken tension. Tara McKinley, a woman whose presence was unmistakable, stood tall, a determined glint in her eyes. She had faced many battles in her life, but this was different. Tonight, she wasn't just a woman at a party. She was here for something much more personal, something that had been haunting her for years. Her ex-husband, Ethan Blackwood, stood not far from her, looking every bit the polished businessman he was. His dark suit fit him perfectly, and yet there was something colder in his demeanor than the icy air outside. The last time they'd seen each other, it had been at their divorce proceedings, a moment neither of them had truly ever moved on from. Their marriage had been a collection of misunderstandings, unspoken words, and unresolved tension, but tonight, all of that was about to resurface. As Tara made her way through the ballroom, her heels clicking on the marble floor, she could feel Ethan's gaze on her. It wasn't just curiosity. It was a challenge, unspoken but palpable. Tara had come prepared. Her every move was calculated. She wasn't here to reminisce about the past or engage in meaningless conversation. No, tonight was about bringing something to light, something that had been hidden away for far too long. Ethan, on the other hand, was still the same man she remembered, at least on the surface. He looked confident, almost detached, like someone who had long since moved past their past. But Tara knew better. She knew that beneath the surface there was still a man who couldn't fully let go of what they'd shared, no matter how hard he tried to convince himself otherwise. The night was young, but the tension between them was thick. Tara knew that this encounter would not be like any other. She wasn't just going to challenge him, she was going to make him face the truth, something that had been buried for too long. She smiled to herself, knowing that no matter how this night ended, it would mark the beginning of a new chapter, for both of them. As they locked eyes across the room, the stakes were clear. This wasn't just a reunion, it was a reckoning. Ian looked at Tara across the crowded ballroom, his gaze steady and calculating. It had been years since he had seen her, but the memories of their marriage, the arguments, the unspoken words, and the sharp pain of their final days together, rushed back. Tara hadn't changed much in his eyes. She still held herself with that same determined confidence that had drawn him to her in the first place. She was beautiful, but there was a fierceness about her now, something that felt different from the woman he had once known. Tara wasn't here just for a reunion. Ethan knew that. There was something more to this. The way she walked through the room, her eyes scanning the crowd, looking for something, or someone. She wasn't there for small talk or to reminisce. Ethan's instincts told him she was on a mission. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he had a sinking feeling that it involved him. Tara had always been unpredictable, but this was different. As the night went on, Ethan found himself being drawn to her again, unable to look away. He didn't know what had changed, but something about the way she held herself, the fire in her eyes, made him realize that he had underestimated her. Tara wasn't the same woman he had walked away from years ago. No, she had grown stronger, more self-assured. He could sense it in the way she carried herself, the confidence radiating from her every step. Still, there was a part of him that hoped, perhaps foolishly, that they could walk away from this night as if nothing had changed. But deep down, he knew better. She wasn't here to just let things go. Ethan took a step closer to the edge of the ballroom, watching as Tara spoke with some of the other guests, her voice clear and strong. She wasn't trying to win anyone over, and yet, somehow, people were drawn to her. He could see the way they hung on her every word, the way they respected her. It made him wonder if he had ever truly understood who she was. The last time they had been together, their lives had been filled with arguments and misunderstandings, and in the end, it was what broke them apart. Tara had always been passionate, and Ethan had always struggled with how to handle that. He thought, at the time, that their differences would eventually drive them apart. He had been wrong. Now, as he watched her in the midst of the crowd, he realized that it wasn't their differences that had torn them apart, it was their inability to truly understand each other. Tara wasn't just a woman who had been hurt by him, she was a force to be reckoned with. She had fought her way through the pain, through the doubts, and had come out on the other side stronger. And Ethan? Well, he was still the same man who had walked away from it all. He was still the man who had never truly fought for her. Tara, however, had always been a fighter. And tonight, Ethan realized, it wasn't just about facing each other again. It was about facing the truth, something neither of them had done for years. Ian's mind was racing. As he watched Tara interact with the other guests, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. It wasn't just the usual discomfort he felt around her. No, this time it was different. He was on edge, unsure of what to expect. There was a palpable tension in the air, as if the ballroom itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Tara seemed to be in control, but Ian couldn't help but feel that he was standing on the edge of something much larger than he had anticipated. He had always believed he knew Tara, had always thought he understood her better than anyone. But now, seeing her so composed, so confident, he realized how little he truly understood about her. The years had changed her, and he wasn't sure if he could keep up. A few moments later, Tara approached him. Her footsteps were measured, purposeful. She wasn't here to make small talk, and Ian knew it. As she stopped in front of him, there was a brief, almost imperceptible pause. The tension between them was so thick it could be cut with a knife. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Tara simply stood there, waiting. Ethan could feel the weight of her gaze, the intensity of it. It made him uncomfortable in a way he hadn't expected. Tara wasn't the woman he had left behind all those years ago. She had become someone new, someone he wasn't sure he could face. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, controlled, but there was an edge to it, a quiet force that made Ethan's heart race. "I've been thinking a lot about the past, Ethan," she said, her eyes never leaving his. "About everything we went through. And about what came after." Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't know where this conversation was headed, but he knew it wasn't going to be easy. "Tara, I know." She cut him off, her voice firm. "Let me speak." Ethan fell silent, his chest tightening. He wasn't sure he was ready for what was coming, but Tara had always had a way of making him listen. "I've been carrying something for a long time," she continued, her voice steady but filled with an emotion that Ethan couldn't quite place. "Something that I couldn't tell you. Not back then, and not until now." There was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that made Ethan's stomach twist with unease. He had no idea what she was talking about, but he could tell that this was no ordinary conversation. This was something far more significant, something that could change everything. "What are you saying?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tara took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving his. "I found something, Ethan. A document. A document that could change everything. And I'm here to tell you that nothing you thought you knew, nothing you believed is the whole truth." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. His breath caught in his throat. What was she talking about? What document? And how did she have it? Tara looked at him, a faint but determined smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Tonight, Ethan," she said softly, "everything will be revealed." Ian stood there, his mind reeling from Tara's words. He could feel the weight of her gaze on him, intense and unwavering. What did she mean by a document? What could possibly be so important that it would change everything he thought he knew? The air between them had thickened, the hum of the ballroom's music now distant in his ears as he focused entirely on Tara. "What are you talking about?" he asked again, his voice strained. Tara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked around the room, as if ensuring no one was too close, no one could overhear their conversation. It was then that Ian noticed something in her hand, something she had been holding all along but he hadn't seen until now. A manila envelope, slightly worn at the edges. The moment his eyes landed on it, the tension in his chest tightened further. She had been holding it, concealing it, as if it were the key to everything. Tara finally spoke, her voice calm yet heavy with meaning. "I'm not here to accuse you, Ethan. I'm here to make sure you understand the truth. The truth about everything." Her words echoed in his mind, like a distant drumbeat he couldn't escape. He wanted to fight it, wanted to tell her that there was no way she could have found something that would change their past, but a small, gnawing part of him, deep down, was afraid she had. Tara didn't wait for him to respond. She opened the envelope slowly, deliberately, as if every movement was calculated. She pulled out a single piece of paper, folded neatly in half, and held it in front of him. "Do you remember this?" she asked quietly. Ian's heart skipped a beat as he glanced down at the paper. It was a document he hadn't seen in years, a document that he thought was long gone, lost in time. He reached for it instinctively, his fingers trembling ever so slightly. Tara watched him closely as he took the paper, unfolding it with caution, as if the words on it might bite. As his eyes scanned the document, a cold chill ran down his spine. It was a contract, but not just any contract. It was an agreement they had made years ago, one that had been signed in the midst of their marriage, a time when everything had seemed perfect. At least, that's how he had convinced himself. But now, looking at it again, with Tara standing before him, it felt like a lie. He had buried the memory of it, thinking it didn't matter, that it had been a mistake they'd both moved past. But now, staring at it in his hands, he realized how wrong he had been. The words on the paper were clear, and they held a meaning that he hadn't been able to fully grasp back then. Tara's eyes never left his face as he processed what he was reading. "You didn't think it mattered, did you?" she asked softly. "You thought we could just forget about it. But I couldn't. I couldn't forget what it meant, what it represented. And I couldn't forget what you did after." The weight of her words hit him like a ton of bricks. For the first time, Ian felt the full force of the choices he had made, the things he had dismissed as insignificant, as irrelevant. He had underestimated Tara. He had underestimated the woman she had become. And now, she was holding the key to everything, the truth he had refused to face for far too long. Ian's fingers gripped the document tightly as the room around him seemed to close in. The words on the paper were like a trap, each line pulling him deeper into a past he thought he had escaped. Tara watched him, her gaze unwavering, and for the first time in years, he could feel the weight of his own decisions crushing him. He had spent so much time convincing himself that his actions had been justified, that everything had been for the best, but now, with the document in his hands and Tara standing before him, he realized how far he had been from the truth. "You don't understand," he muttered, his voice hoarse, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. Tara shook her head slowly, her expression one of quiet frustration. "I understand more than you think, Ethan," she said softly, her voice tinged with something he couldn't quite place, perhaps pain, perhaps betrayal. "The difference is, I didn't bury it. I didn't bury the truth the way you did. I couldn't. I wasn't going to let you get away with it." His mind raced, trying to piece everything together. The contract in his hands, the way Tara was looking at him, the heavy silence that hung between them, it was all coming together in a way he hadn't expected. The choices he had made, the things he had ignored, the lies he had told himself, they were no longer something he could run from. "What do you want me to say?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tara didn't immediately respond. Instead, she took a step closer to him, closing the distance between them. She was calm, composed, but there was a fire in her eyes, one that made Ethan's heart beat faster. I want you to finally face the truth, Ethan, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. I want you to understand what you've done, not just to me, but to yourself. You thought you could walk away, leave everything behind, and pretend like none of it mattered. But it does matter. It always mattered. Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in deeper than he was willing to admit. Tara wasn't asking for an apology, not in the way he expected. She wasn't trying to punish him. She was trying to make him see, truly see, the consequences of his actions. The truth was staring him in the face, and for the first time, he couldn't look away. I didn't want this to happen, he said, his voice cracking. I didn't want any of this. Tara's eyes softened for a brief moment, but the edge of determination never left her. You didn't want it, but you still chose it. And now, here we are. Ethan's chest tightened as the full realization of her words hit him. It wasn't just about their marriage, their past, it was about everything. The lies, the choices, the things he had convinced himself were unimportant. Tara had held on to the truth all this time, waiting for the moment when she could finally reveal it. And now that moment had come. The ballroom, with its laughter and music, felt miles away. All that mattered now was this moment, this truth, and the consequences of the choices that had brought them here. Ian's heart raced as the weight of Tara's words sank deeper into him. He stood there, frozen, holding the contract in his hands as if it might burn him. Every thought he had been carrying around, every excuse he had made for his past actions, crumbled before him. Tara had always been the one to see through the walls he had built around himself. She had always known how to get under his skin, how to make him question everything. But now, as he looked at her, he realized that this time, she wasn't the one who was going to break. He was. Tara's eyes were still on him, unwavering. She hadn't moved, hadn't flinched, even though she knew the impact of what she was saying. She had waited for this moment, and now it had come. She wasn't afraid of what was to come, because she had already made peace with the truth. But Ethan? He wasn't so sure. Why now? He finally asked, his voice hoarse. Why bring this up now, after all this time? Tara let out a small, bitter laugh. You think I wanted to wait this long? You think I wanted to carry this around with me, buried for years? Her words were sharp, but there was no anger in her voice, just a quiet, aching sorrow. I did what I had to do, Ethan. I couldn't confront you before, not when we were both so caught up in our own lies. But now it's different. Ian stared at her, still trying to process everything. He had always believed that his choices had been his alone, that the consequences were his to bear. But standing here, with Tara's truth in front of him, he realized how wrong he had been. The document was more than just a piece of paper. It was a reflection of everything he had overlooked, everything he had taken for granted. What do you want me to do with this? He asked, his voice quieter now. Tara's gaze softened, but there was still a firmness to it, a conviction that Ian hadn't seen in her before. I don't want anything from you, Ethan, she said, her tone gentle but resolute. What I want is for you to understand. To realize that the choices we made, those were our choices. But they weren't just about us. They affected everyone around us. They affected me. And they affected you. Ian felt a pang of guilt tighten in his chest. He hadn't considered how deeply his actions had cut into her life. He hadn't thought about the long-term effects, the lasting scars. All he had ever seen was his own pain, his own regret. But Tara had been living with the consequences of his choices for so long, and now, she was finally showing him what that looked like. He wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. Tara had taken away the armor he had built around himself, and now he was exposed. I didn't know it would hurt you this much, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Tara stepped closer, her presence calm and steady. You didn't know, Ethan. But you should have. You should have seen it. You should have known that your decisions had consequences. And now we're both facing them. The silence between them stretched, and for the first time, Ethan understood the weight of everything he had done. Tara had opened his eyes to a truth he had been too blind to see. The document in his hand was no longer just a piece of paper. It was a mirror to his own failures, and the reflection was more painful than anything he had ever imagined. Ian stood motionless, the document still clenched in his hand. He had been given a moment of clarity, but it felt more like a burden than a revelation. Tara had done what he never thought possible. She had stripped away all the layers he had built around himself, and now, there was nowhere left to hide. He had always thought he was in control, that his decisions were his alone to make. But in that moment, he realized how far off he had been. Everything he had done had been a reflection of his own fears, his own inability to face the truth. The truth that Tara had always known, had always carried, and that he had ignored for so long. Tara's voice broke through his thoughts, calm and steady. "You think you're the only one who has suffered, don't you?" she asked softly. He looked at her, his eyes still clouded with the weight of everything they had been through, but there was a flicker of understanding. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said quietly. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Tara's gaze softened for a moment, but her next words were firm. "No, you didn't. But you did it anyway." The finality in her voice was like a door closing, leaving him with no escape, no more excuses. Ian knew that he couldn't go back, couldn't change what had already happened. All he could do now was face what was in front of him, the consequences of his own choices. "I've spent years thinking I could outrun this," he said, more to himself than to Tara. "I thought if I buried it deep enough, if I pretended it never happened, it would all go away. But it didn't, did it?" Tara shook her head, her expression unreadable. "No, it didn't. And it won't. The past doesn't go away, Ethan. You can try to forget, but it will always catch up with you. It's never as simple as walking away." Ethan's throat tightened. He had been running from the truth for so long, had convinced himself that by putting up walls, by shutting Tara out, he could somehow erase the past. But now, he saw the truth for what it was. It wasn't just about him. It was about everything they had shared, everything they had lost, and the things he had taken for granted. "I was wrong," he whispered. Tara nodded, as though she had known this moment would come, as though she had been waiting for it. "You were," she agreed quietly. "But the question now is, what will you do with that?" Ian's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of her words settled into him. What could he do now? What was left to fix? He had spent so much time avoiding the truth, and now that it was laid bare before him, he didn't know how to move forward. "I don't know," he said finally, his voice small, vulnerable. Tara didn't offer him answers, but she didn't need to. She had given him the truth, and now, it was up to him to decide how to live with it. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something he hadn't in a long time: uncertainty. The path ahead was unclear, but he knew one thing for sure: he could no longer hide from what he had done, or from what Tara had shown him. The journey to redemption, if there was even such a thing, would start with facing what he had avoided for so long. Ian stood there, the weight of Tara's words still pressing down on him. The document in his hand felt like a chain, binding him to everything he had tried to avoid. Tara had shown him the truth, but now he was faced with the challenge of confronting it. What could he do now? Where could he go from here? Tara had always been a fighter. She had never backed down, even when life had thrown everything at her. And now, standing before him, she wasn't just a woman with a painful past, she was a woman who had faced that past head-on and emerged stronger. Ian couldn't help but admire her, even as guilt twisted in his chest. He had spent so many years running from his own mistakes, burying them deep within himself. But Tara had done the opposite. She had faced everything, and now, she was showing him that he could do the same. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm, when everything has been said and there's nothing left but the truth. Tara's expression softened as she watched him, and for a moment, Ian thought he saw something in her eyes, something that wasn't just pain, but a glimmer of hope. I don't expect you to have all the answers, Ethan, she said quietly. But you have to start somewhere. Ian nodded, though he wasn't sure where to start. The weight of the past was still heavy on his shoulders, and he wasn't sure how to begin lifting it. But one thing was clear, he couldn't keep running. He couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. Tara had shown him the truth, and now, he had to face it. I don't know if I can fix everything, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can make things right. Tara didn't answer right away. She just watched him, as though waiting for him to find his own way. Finally she spoke, her voice gentle but firm. It's not about making everything right, Ethan. It's about being willing to face the things you've done, the things you've avoided. That's where it starts. The rest will come later. Her words settled over him like a blanket, warm and comforting in their simplicity. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about fixing everything at once. It was about taking that first step, about acknowledging the pain and the mistakes and being willing to grow from them. Ian felt a shift within himself, something he hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the beginning of redemption. He wasn't sure, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had the strength to move forward. He looked at Tara, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something he hadn't known he still had in him. Thank you, he said quietly, for showing me the truth. For helping me see what I've been avoiding all this time. Tara gave him a small, knowing smile. You don't have to thank me, Ethan. It was always there. You just needed to see it for yourself. The ballroom around them seemed to fade into the background as they stood there. Two people bound by a shared past, yet finally free to face the future. Ian didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he was ready to find out. He wasn't alone anymore. And that, in itself, was a start. Ian stood still, the sounds of the ballroom swirling around him, but they felt distant now. Everything had changed in the span of a few moments. Tara had opened his eyes to the truth, a truth he had long buried, hoping it would fade into the past. But it hadn't. And now, as he looked at her, he realized something he had never understood before. He didn't have to be defined by his past mistakes. Tara had given him a choice, a chance to move forward. He wasn't sure how he would do it, but for the first time, he believed that he could. The weight of the document in his hand was still there, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a key, one that could unlock the future if he was brave enough to use it. Tara gave him a gentle smile, one that held no judgment, only understanding. It was clear that she had already made peace with what had happened. She had found a way to move forward, and now, she was offering him the same opportunity. You don't have to do this alone, you know, she said quietly, her voice a comforting presence in the chaos of the evening. No one expects you to have all the answers, to fix everything right away. But the first step is to admit it. To accept it. Ian looked down at the document again, the weight of it still heavy, but not in the same suffocating way it had been before. It was just paper, a symbol of everything he had ignored. And now, it was time to stop ignoring it. I've spent so much time trying to make everything perfect, he said, his voice low and contemplative. I thought if I just controlled everything, if I built walls around myself, I could protect myself from all the pain. But in doing that, I shut everything out. I shut you out. Tara's expression softened, and for a moment, Ian saw a flash of the woman she had been when they were together, the woman he had fallen in love with. She wasn't angry, she wasn't resentful. She was just calm. It's okay, Ethan, she said, her voice warm. We both made mistakes. But that doesn't mean we can't move forward. It doesn't mean we have to stay stuck in the past. Ian nodded, the truth of her words settling deep within him. He wasn't stuck. Not anymore. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of clarity, like the fog in his mind was finally starting to clear. He could see a future now, one where he wasn't running from the past, but facing it. It was a future he hadn't even allowed himself to imagine until now. Thank you, he said quietly, the words feeling heavy but sincere. Thank you for helping me see that. Tara's smile widened, and she gave a small, reassuring nod. You don't have to thank me, Ethan. You've always had the strength inside you. You just needed to find it again. Ian took a deep breath, the air in his lungs feeling different now, fresher somehow. He had a long road ahead of him, and it wouldn't be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments when he would want to give up. But he knew now that he didn't have to face it alone. He had Tara's strength, and his own, to guide him. As they stood there, in the heart of the ballroom, the noise of the world around them fading into the background, Ian knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. The first step had been taken. And now, he was ready to walk forward, no longer weighed down by the past, but free to create a new future. Together.